Karl Marx, one of the most influential thinkers of 19th century, was born in Germany in 1818 and died in England in 1883 as a stateless person. A few of his friends were present at the funeral. There are two messages engraved on his tombstone. One reads, "Workers of all lands unite." And the other reads, "Philosophers have described the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." In order to understand the influence Karl Marx has exerted on the contemporary world, we have just to look at the world in which we live, in which many of the governments name themselves after his name. Karl Marx was the originator of a philosophical system or a thought system, which is a very rich and creative mixture of German philosophy, French politics, and British economics. In the strict sense of the term, it is not pure philosophy, but the kind of philosophy it has, the element of philosophy that it has, that is Hegelian. Karl Marx, as a young student, was a Hegelian, and he became a socialist only towards the mid-20s of his life. So he was a left Hegelian. And later on, he developed his own system and what we call the materialistic philosophy, historical materialism of Karl Marx. And because of his political activities, he had to suffer a lot. So he left Germany at the age of 31 and came to England, where he stayed all his life, and most of his works were written there. So it was in England that he worked mostly in British Museum Library, and where he wrote his most famous book, Das Kapital, and other books as well. He had a very kind friend and comrade, Friedrich Engels, who kept him whole of his life so that he can produce his work, philosophical work, which has almost transformed the world. Karl Marx got his philosophical inspiration, as we have already said, from Hegel, but his ideas were molded by other influences also, to which we have hinted at. But he took lock, stock and barrel some equations from Hegel, which he applied to his thought system, and he just changed the value of one variable, x, say for example, and instead of mind, he put matter, he put economics. Now we find that the dialectical method, which is the most important contribution of Hegel, is adopted by Karl Marx. And now we say that this process of change, the reality being a historical phenomena, the reality being an evolving phenomena, this is borrowed by Marx from Hegel. Now when we say that what is it that changes, now Hegel's answer is that it is the mind, it is the Geist that undergoes the change. But for Marx, it is the economic structure, it is the economic base, it is the economic foundation of the society that changes, and that gives rise to the different stages of history, of different forms of society come into existence because of this process of change. And you see, the concept that ideas are embedded in historical processes, ideas are embedded in societies, in social institutions, in political institutions, and societies change, political systems change, historical situations change, so there is a change in ideas also, concepts also. This notion also is borrowed from Hegel, and Karl Marx says that he has put the Hegel on his feet, otherwise he was head down. So the kind of philosophy we get in Marx is heavily influenced by Hegelian thought. In Hegel, we have seen that the mind undergoes this process of change, and the change is dialectical, and it is a goal-oriented change. It is a directed change. For Marx also, the process of change is linear, and it is directed towards a goal. It is goal-oriented, and the goal here is a conflict-free society. It is a society which is a classless society, casteless society, a stateless society, a society of equals. Now, this kind of society is the goal of the historical process towards which the history moves. And unless and until we attain to that goal, we are supposed to live in one form or other of alienation. So we had to be alienated from ourselves unless and until we attain the goal of a conflict-free society. Now, this conflict-free society can be attained only through the historical process of evolution. Basic structure is economic structure, and it is the economic structure which changes, and with it changes everything, our philosophy, our religion, our concepts. Now, in order to comprehend this change, in order to comprehend the fact that the history is moving towards a goal, history is a goal-oriented process, and it is the basic structure is economic structure. And you see, when you understand that historical process is goal-oriented process, it has to reach a certain stage, you can intervene, you can make interventions, human beings can make interventions so that the process is accelerated, the process of evolution is accelerated, and there is attainment of the goal in a shorter, or probably shorter period of time. So the kind of philosophy Marx is advocating is that of Hegel, and the basic parameters are the same. Reality is historical in nature. Reality is not something which is eternal, unchangeable, immutable. It is a historical phenomenon, and ideas are not eternal, they are not immutable, they are not changeless. Reality is not changeless. Reality is a process of change. Reality undergoes a process of change, and the process of change leads to a goal, and that goal is a conflict-free society. And the process of evolution is through a pattern of change that's called dialectics after Hegel: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. For Hegel, the element that was undergoing change was spiritual in nature, was mental in nature, because Hegel was an idealist. But for Marx, the element that undergoes the change is something that is material in nature, because Marx was a materialist. Now, Marx all his life lived a life of poverty, and he always lived from hand to mouth, and it was due to the generosity of his friend Engels that he could live in England, and he could work, and he could produce his books, and he could be a contributor towards the world thought. Now, Engels created that space for him, or helped him in creating that space. Now, in order to be, you see, later on, we find that Marxism was abused, and it was translated into communism, and communism gave rise to a kind of a state that we know in the form of Stalin Russian state, and where the individual freedom was most gravely abused. But Marx would never have been happy with that kind of situation. Marx was basically a philosopher of freedom. Now, it is narrated that once his daughter told him that what is the vice, what is the evil he most despises, he most hated. Karl Marx's response was, it is servility. it is slavery, it is sort of bondage. And bondage is the biggest evil, bondage is the biggest vice that Marx contemplated as biggest evil and biggest vice that should not be allowed to grow in the human societies. But unfortunately, that happened in different communist societies, and we are witness to that in our own times. But that was not the goal of Marx. Now, Marx wanted to see individuals as well as societies expressing their freedom, realizing their freedom, and making best of their freedom so that they are able to actualize their human potential. Human potential can be realized, it can be actualized only in a free society. So definitely we have to create that space. So unless individuals cannot survive by themselves, they have to live in a society, and social space is essential for the survival of individuals. So you cannot draw straight lines in a curved space. So society is the space where we live. You have to have a kind of society where you can grow. See, unless and until society is a free society, how can an individual be a free individual? So that's why Marx was concentrating on the society. But this was a kind of abuse that this system was prone to, vulnerable to. Because one of the assumptions of Marx is that if you change the economic circumstances, then you change the human nature. But that's not the case. If you stop human beings competing in the market, competing for wealth, they will compete for status, they will compete for fame, they will compete for something else. So as Hegel has committed this mistake, he had thought that man is predominantly rational, and when man realizes and knows his rational nature, all the distinctions will be eliminated. Similarly, Marx thought that when we change the economic structure, because for him economic structure is the basic structure, it is the element that undergoes change, and if economic disparities are removed, if economic imbalances are removed, if economic injustice is removed, all sorts of injustice will be removed. But that is not the case. We find that human psychology is more complex than this, and we find that even if people are not allowed to compete for money, there are many more things they would be competing for, and this competition will never go. And that is why what happened to that we see what happened to communism. So the kind of reduction that Marx has done to everything as economic, and if economic base in economic circumstances, so that is not probably much thought of, and that is why the philosophy has been abused in the manner it has been. So now the question arises, what is the basic contribution of Marx to philosophy? Marx is not a philosopher in the narrow academic sense of the term. As I said earlier, Marx is a materialist. In ontology, he is of the view that ultimate reality is matter. But he does not argue for this position. He does not give any arguments for establishing this fact that ultimate reality is matter. He takes it as something obvious. He takes it as something for granted. He takes it as something which need no arguments, as an obvious truth. So he does not contribute to the philosophical debate on the ontological status of matter. So that way, we can't say that he has contributed anything in the terms of ontology in philosophy. Now, second thing, he has definitely given us a vision of the world where we are controlled by economic circumstances, and where we are bonded, we are slaves of these economic circumstances. We are not free. And Marx gives us a vision of the world where we can control these economic circumstances and we can liberate ourselves. What is this economic base? This is the creation of human collectivity. Now, if human collectivity realizes its capacity, its power to change this economic structure so that it suits the society, so that it suits the individual interests, so the kind of society we can build where we will not have these constraints, where we will not have this bondage, and a kind of economic structure is evolved whereby each individual is ensured of his freedom, so that he or she can grow, he or she can realize his or her human potential, and that kind of world we can envisage. So because economics is our creation, economic base, economic structure, which Marx assumes is the basic structure, is the origin of everything in human society. It is the origin, it's the source of every social, political, religious, philosophical, or any other kind of phenomena. So its origin is economic structure. Now, if we restructure this economics, if we restructure these economic circumstances to suit the collectivity, to suit the individual, we would have changed the face of the society, we will have changed the face of the world. So if we can create an economic structure that is conducive to human freedom, that is conducive to human evolution, that is conducive to human growth, that ensures human freedom and equality and justice, that is, we can be masters of our destiny. So Marx gives us a vision that we have to take hold of our destiny, and when we take hold of our destiny, then only we can be free. And this is possible. This is not something impossible. This is not something even very difficult. So we have to make an effort to comprehend the structures of the society. When we understand the basic structure of the society, when we understand what is the origin of every evil thing, or what is the origin of this pathological socio-political condition of ours, so we have to address to that pathological condition. So what is the remedy? What is the remedy? What is the cure? The cure, according to Marx, is to change the economic circumstances of any political economy so that a society is built, an economy is built, a political organization is built, a political society is built, which is based on such economic circumstances, such economic structure, which ensures freedom of everyone and enables everyone to realize one's potential as a human being. Now we again see that Marxism has been abused, as I earlier said. Now because of this because of this assumption of Marx, that if we eliminate economic differences, if we eliminate that economic structure which is responsible for this kind of pathological social state, we would be eliminating all other pathological conditions of the society. But that does not hold. Man is not only an economical creature. Man does not crave for only economic prosperity. Man has many other ambitions. So as we said, if we stop man from competing for wealth, then again he will compete for certain other things. So Marx gave most important priority to economic structure of the society, economic forces. Now what are the economic forces of any society? Now according to Marx, the forces of production, the means of production, which include land, natural resources, and technology of a particular time for the production of various goods and services. And then there are economic relations. Now because of those production resources, because of that distribution of economic activities, distribution of the goods, a kind of relationship, a web of relationship develops. And taken these together, these are called economic structure by Marx. And as per Marx, there are different stages in human history whereby one system gives place to another system, and one system comes to a stage where it is not sustainable because of the contradictions inherent in the system. As Marx says, that feudal system in the Europe could not manage its conflicts, and it broke down into capitalist system of society. Now the capitalist system of society cannot sustain its contradictions for long, and it has to end up into the governance by the proletariat, and that would be a brief period, an interlude to the stateless society, a classless society and a stateless society. So the kind of contradictions, as we talked about, as we said that Marx inherited this kind of philosophical ideas from Hegel. Now for Marx, the ultimate reality is material, and in social and political considerations, the ultimate reality is economic structure of a political economy, a political society, and it is this economic structure which undergoes change over a period of time, and which is a historical phenomena, and at the various stages of history we have different forms of this economic structure, and this change is leading to a conflict-free society, and this change is proceeding through a pattern, and that pattern is dialectical in nature, that is thesis, antithesis and synthesis. Now let me explain a little bit. According to dialectical method, any situation that obtains, any complex situation that obtains is fraught with conflicts, and these conflicts destabilize the situation. Therefore, it cannot go on indefinitely. So it has to end somewhere. The situation breaks down because of its own conflicts and contradictions. And in this breakage, the conflicts and contradictions are resolved, and a new situation emerges. In this new situation, it carries its own conflicts. A time comes when the situation becomes unsustainable, and it again breaks down, and the conflicts and contradictions therein are resolved, and a new situation emerges, and this new situation itself becomes a thesis, and then contradictions become its antithesis, and when the breakage takes place, when the conflicts are resolved and a new situation emerges, that is called synthesis. This synthesis itself becomes a thesis, and then again antithesis and synthesis. This process of change, this process of dialectical pattern change will continue in the history till we sort of reach the end or goal of history, and that is a conflict-free society. A conflict-free society is a society which is in which there are no injustices, there are no inequalities, and every man is free to realize his human potential. As I said earlier, Marx was basically a philosopher of freedom, but the kind of questions he addressed himself, now he tried to do away with the curvature of the space. Now, unless and until you do away with the curvature of the space, unless and until you create a society where we can have free individuals, you can't have free individuals. You can have free individuals in a free society only. So, in order to understand the interests of the individual and interests of the society, so we have to grant that society will take precedence. So, because of that, we see that Marxism is abused. But otherwise, Marx aimed at the liberation of the individual, at the freedom of the individual, at the growth and evolution of the individual. So Marx was very critical about the regimes, about the stages of history that perpetuated this kind of economic circumstances, economic structure which curbed human freedom and which annihilated human growth and evolution. So Marx says that the truth of the haves is always universal truth. The class that controls the power, the class that is economically well off, He calls them haves. And the society is always divided into haves and have-nots. That is, rich and poor. And rich people make their claims, for their statements they claim universal truth. For example, a man who possesses everything, he claims that theft is immoral. Now, because he has to protect his property, and he makes this a universal statement. A person who has no property, for him or her, this statement has no meaning. This statement has no use. And the kind of society Marx wanted to create, and the kind of society Marx wanted to have, was a kind of society that would be liberating, that would be emancipating, that would be free, and where every human being would be able to exercise his freedom. So now, what can man do to accelerate this process? Now, we understand that reality is a historical process. It is not something eternal. It is not something changeless. It is not something immutable. It evolves, and it has a goal, and the goal is the conflict-free society. Now, when you have realized it, when one has realized that reality is a historical process, and man can be relieved of his alienated state only by attaining the status of a conflict-free society, man can make interventions. So, Karl Marx was of the view that end justifies means. If you have to do something which is normally regarded as unethical, immoral, but for the sake of the goal, for the sake of the accelerating the process of historical growth, historical change, so you can act in a way that is normally regarded as immoral or unethical, but your means are justified by your goal. Since your goal is the attainment of conflict-free society, so whatever you do in this process is justified. So this was the vision of Marx, which is in itself a philosophical vision, but in a very technical and academic manner, it is not a big discovery, but it is a very liberating vision. Thank you.